We speak to Visvin Reddy, convener of People Against Petrol and Paraffin Price Increase. Thank you very much, sir, for your patience with us and for your time this afternoon. So throughout the course of the day, we've spoken to taxi drivers who say, well, they can barely afford this, especially when you take a look at maintenance of their vehicles. E-hailing drivers say they may have to be pushed off the streets. And taxi drivers, again, saying, well, this may also lead to an increase in prices for people who use the mode of transport. And there you hear from the logistics industry. You wondered to yourself whether we have a caring government. Why?
Thank you very much for having me on the program. And I think it's a very important discussion that we're having today. Yesterday's news, where our fuel prices have gone up astronomically, is both devastating and catastrophic. It's not just for motorists and for the trucking industries, but it's for every South African. I believe every South African today is much worse off as a result of the fuel price increases that came into effect last night. Let's understand what this does. It picks up the price of food. It picks up the price of almost everything. It affects the poorest of the poor the most. And I cannot overemphasize this point. It's almost as though we have a bunch of nincompoops in government that they do not see the impact of these fuel increases on citizens of this country. And this is, of course, deeply concerning. We at PAPPI, we've been looking into this matter for several years. There are solutions. The government is simply not implementing viable alternatives to reduce fuel prices in this country. It's almost as though they're not thinking out of the box, and this is really worrying. Now, if you look around the world, the reason that the government throws at us as a common reason is that the fuel prices are determined by the price of crude oil and the value of the dollar. Now, you must know that we're buying crude oil in dollars. And currently, the rand-dollar exchange is edging around 20 rands to a dollar. So this is going to continue for at least a good couple of months. The increases that we had last night.
Allow me to just join you. You speak of Brent crude oil, and it's hit the $90 a barrel mark. And so when you speak of government not presenting viable options, what are some of those viable options, do you believe?
Okay, let's look at India. India, as a result of the pressure that's been brought on the government by the citizens of India, the government would not take very lightly passing on any increases to its people. And this is not just India, Venezuela, even here in Africa, countries in Africa, even the UK. In fact, there's over 90 countries that are currently undergoing fuel protests by communities. What they've done in India is they've broken away from the OPEC cartel. The countries that are part of OPEC are actually holding a gun to the rest of the world. They are deliberately manipulating the price of crude oil, and they've instructed countries now to start reducing supplies of crude oil so that the value of the crude oil can increase. And all it does is it increases the value of the dollar. You all know that the USA is currently going through a recession, so they'll do anything and pull out any rabbit out of the hat so that they can try and increase the value of the dollar, and that's what they're doing currently. Now, India has now decided to break away from OPEC. They're buying crude oil from Russia and Iran. Russia was the largest producer of crude oil in the last financial year. And now that South Africa is part of the BRICS countries and many of the oil producers who are not part of OPEC are actually now part of BRICS, it presents an ideal opportunity for our government to actually start buying crude oil from other countries outside of OPEC and using our own currency. That makes perfect sense, but unfortunately it will take a lot of not just debating and discussions on Newzroom Afrika to get this government to be able to look out of the box and to find those solutions. But what we need to understand is that we are in this predicament today precisely because of the government's mismanagement of the fuel situation in this country. You know, we sold our fuel reserves. The fuel reserves in South Africa was what was used by the government in the past to cushion these increases. The fuel reserves were sold illegally by former Energy Minister Juma Peterson. And those fuel reserves, the whole sale is under investigation. Nothing has happened from that. And did you know, and does your viewers know, that South Africa is actually a fuel producing country? During the apartheid days, the government invested in what is now known as Sasol. Sasol makes fuel from coal. We export that fuel to neighboring countries, and they sell it cheaper than what we get our fuel in South Africa for. So, Dudu, clearly, we need to go back to the drawing board. Bring Sasol back in. The cost to manufacture Sasol fuel is around 6 rands a litre, and Sasol is amassing huge profits using the resources of this country, and that's the reason why they sit currently in the top 10 on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. The government makes 95 billion rands from the general fuel levy that goes towards government expenses and taxes. That 95 billion doesn't need to come from motorists and from the fuels. It can come from a special tax on monopoly industry that sits on the JSE. Take that 95 billion from a special tax on those companies, and you immediately reduce the price of petrol in this country by 35%. So if you look at our solutions, Dudu, we are able to say that in South Africa, we will be able to bring the fuel prices down to about 10 rands a litre. It's very possible, except that we do not need nincompoops in government who have no clue about what they're doing to run the process of fuel pricing.
Mr. Reddy, thank you so much for your time. We'll definitely test the possibilities in terms of taking a look at other countries for getting fuel with economists, and also take a look at some of the allegations that you have made about the U.S. colluding on the price of Brent crude oil. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Visvin Reddy is the convener of People Against Petrol and Paraffin Price Increase.